What if the path to true awakening was never about finding the light, but about having the courage to walk straight into the heart of your own darkness? The great psychologist Carl Jung issued a solemn warning to all seekers. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is because before you can meet your true essence, before you can finally grasp the immensity of who you truly are, everything you thought you were must first begin to collapse. This journey we are about to embark on will not offer you comfort. It is not here to soothe your mind or to validate the ego you have so carefully constructed. Consider this an invitation, a sacred summons to sit with your own shadow, to finally turn and face the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime running from, and to stay there, no matter how loud the silence becomes, because it is only there, in the shattered, holy quiet of the soul, that what is real can finally begin. The spark that ignites a genuine spiritual awakening is not always a conscious quest for answers. It is not about deliberately seeking light, peace, or transcendence. More often than not, it begins as a silent, guttural cry from the very depths of your being, a call that words cannot name, a deep cellular ache for something more. It is a profound restlessness that emerges not from the anxious chatter of the mind, but from somewhere far older, deeper, and more sacred. And it does not always come gently. It often arrives like a seismic earthquake, shaking the very foundations of your identity, violently pulling apart the seams of everything you once considered familiar and safe. Most people do not survive this process intact, not because it kills the body, but because it systematically and ruthlessly dismantles every constructed identity, every carefully curated narrative, and every protective mask they spent a lifetime perfecting. The personality they so meticulously built, the roles they played, the labels they wore, begins to fall apart, disintegrating in the face of something far more powerful and uncontrollable. The raw, untamed truth of their own soul. When this profound unraveling begins, many retreat. They numb themselves with distractions. They cling to old certainties. They return to the comforting illusion of the life they knew. They go back to sleep. They do this because the truth, raw, wild, and unpolished, does not come to cradle you. It comes to break you. It shatters the illusions you clung to for safety, the stories you depended on for meaning, and the personas that became a second skin. It undoes you. It tears away your safety nets. It mercilessly strips you of the borrowed beliefs and second-hand dreams you mistook for your own. This is the part of the journey no one talks about. It is the chapter left out of the sugar-coated, romanticized stories about enlightenment. It is the silent scream beneath the serene smile. It is the psychic death, the soul's terrifying trembling when it finally realizes that the world it knew, the map it was given, has stopped making any sense at all. They told you that awakening was about finding the light, but that is only half of the journey. The other half is born in shadow. When you pass through that hidden threshold, the world as you know it begins to dissolve, not in a literal sense, but in a deeply existential one. The meanings you once assigned to things start to crumble into dust. The version of yourself you so confidently believed in begins to vanish like a phantom in the morning light. Your gods, your ambitions, your most cherished beliefs, all the internal structures that held your reality together become hollow, mocking echoes in a chamber you no longer know how to inhabit. This is precisely what Jung meant. There is no awakening without pain, because awakening does not arrive wrapped in a blanket of peace. It arrives cloaked in a profound and personal crisis. It begins the moment the life you so painstakingly built starts to feel like a lie. Not a cruel or malicious lie, but a necessary one, a scaffolding that once shielded you from truths you were not yet strong enough to face. But now you are, or at least some ancient, buried, untamed part of you is ready. A sacred part of you that refuses, with every fiber of its being, to fall back asleep. You can no longer unsee what you have seen. The dreams you once chased with such fervor now feel as though they belong to someone else entirely. The people who once felt like home, your closest confidants, now seem distant, as if you have inadvertently drifted to a different vibrational frequency. The pleasures and distractions that used to excite you now taste like ash in your mouth. And what remains in their place is a silence so profound, so vast, it drowns out the voice you used to call me. This is the death of the ego, and it is not a poetic metaphor. It is a real, visceral, and often harrowing psychological death of identity. If you resist it, the pain intensifies exponentially. If you fight it, it can feel like you are descending into madness. And even if you surrender to it, it will still tear you wide open. But it is only within that sacred tearing, through the cracks of your former self, that you catch your first, fleeting glimpse of the eternal. This is why so many turn back. The old self, the ego, does not die quietly. It fights for its life with the ferocity of a cornered animal. It screams, it bargains, it begs for survival. It floods your mind with rationalizations, telling you that this is just a phase of depression, that you are lost, that you are broken. And from its perspective, perhaps you are, because the map you were given by society was never meant to lead you back to your true self. You were taught how to fit in, how to succeed, how to follow the mold. But no one ever taught you how to be real. No one showed you how to descend into your own depths. No one prepared you to turn inward and listen to the faint, persistent whisper of your soul beneath the noise of the world. So yes, the descent feels like a terrifying destruction. But in truth, it is a sacred invitation. It is an initiation into your own rebirth. You will be asked in no uncertain terms to let go of everything that is not real. Every label you wore, every mask you hid behind, every identity that was never truly yours to begin with. You will lose things. You will lose people. You will lose versions of yourself you once thought were eternal. And you will have to let them go. Because if you cling to them, if you try to drag the ghosts of your past into the new frequency of your future, they will rot in your hands. Awakening does not offer you a better, shinier version of your old life. It burns that life to the ground. And then, in the lingering smoke and ashes, it waits patiently to see if anything dares to rise from what has been lost. Most people turn back here. They choose the familiar comfort of their cage over the terrifying freedom of the wild unknown. They choose the applause of the crowd over the quiet integrity of their own soul. They choose the predictable over the authentic, because the wild is terrifying. It speaks a language the rational mind cannot comprehend. It does not want your plans or your 5-step programs. It asks you to feel. It asks you to stay. It asks you to hold your gaze steady when the mirror finally shows you the parts of yourself you tried to forget, the parts you disowned and buried long ago. It reveals your shadow, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a long, lost part of you, abandoned and aching to come home. It is the part of you that learned to cry in silence, the part that learned to manipulate, to fear, to control, just to survive in a world that felt devoid of love. And yet, that very same part, that wounded, shadowy part, is precisely where your rebirth begins. Now, it asks only to be seen, to be recognized. Awakening does not mean running away from that shadow. On the contrary, it means inviting it to sit beside you at the fire. It means looking it straight in the eyes, even when its language is cruel, even when it speaks to you through the suffocating weight of discomfort, through the deafening silence, through the chaos it creates in your life. The shadow does not speak softly. It expresses itself through your deepest pains, through your most baffling acts of self-sabotage, through your compulsions and addictions, through the destructive instincts that seem to tear apart the very things you hold most sacred. It lives in your searing jealousy, in your sudden bursts of rage, in your constant, exhausting need to defend yourself. And as long as you continue to look away, to pretend it is not there, you will remain trapped, looping endlessly in the same self-defeating patterns, the same toxic relationships, the same paralyzing fears. What most people tragically fail to understand is that awakening is not the end of suffering. It is the conscious, courageous beginning of facing it, truly facing it, with raw honesty, with wide open eyes, with your soul stripped bare. That is why very few ever truly cross the threshold, because awakening does not ask for something small from you. It demands everything. It demands your grief. It demands your fury. It demands your silence. It requires your absolute willingness to be reborn with no guarantees, with no certainty of who you will become on the other side. It asks you to die while you are still breathing, to lose your mind in order to find your soul, to watch the entire scaffolding of your identity collapse into rubble, and still find the strength to whisper yes. And in that yes, everything begins. This descent does not require your strength. It requires your surrender. And that is what terrifies the ego most of all, because the ego was built to control. It was designed to manage what you feel, what others see, the story you tell yourself about who you are. It was forged in a world that punishes vulnerability and rewards performance. But your soul did not come here to merely survive. It came to transform, and every true transformation requires a breaking down. You must shed the armor. You must unravel the stories. You must dismantle the structures that once told you who you had to be. Only then can something real emerge, not something born from fear, but something born from essence. And your essence does not shout. It does not demand attention. It waits. It waits with the patience of mountains, silently, for the noise of your life to finally settle, for the masks to fall away, for the mind to exhaust itself with its endless, anxious spinning. Then, and only then, it whispers, not in words, but through a deep, unmistakable yearning, a profound longing for something more, not more success, not more approval, but something more real, more honest, more alive. Do not mistake that longing for weakness. Do not label it as depression or dysfunction. It is the call. It is the sacred signal from your soul that you are ready to leave the lie behind. But here lies the brutal truth. Most people hear that call and immediately pretend that nothing is happening. They smother it with achievements. They drown it in distractions. They numb it with routine. Because to truly answer that call means losing the world you built on sand. And no one warns you just how profoundly lonely that first step can be. The first stage of awakening is not beauty. It is exile. It is an exile from the familiar. It is an exile from your socially accepted self. It is an exile from the entire system of validation that you did not even realize you depended on for your sense of worth. And in that exile, you will ache to return. You will miss the numbness, the predictability, the hollow comfort of pretending. But something deep inside you, that ancient, untamed part, will not allow it. Because once you have seen the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you have felt the immense weight and beauty of your own soul, you cannot go back to floating on the surface of your life. So you begin to wander. You wander through sleepless nights that stretch into eternity, through mornings stained with tears you cannot explain, through relationships that suddenly feel empty and hollow. Even if no one has done anything wrong, you are not broken. You are in the in-between. You are in the sacred, liminal space between what you once were and what has not yet emerged. You are in the cocoon, the void, the chrysalis where the old has died, but the new has not yet taken root. It is a terrifying place, and it is a sacred one. And it is there that your soul begins its deepest work. There, in the void, the shadow steps in closer. It is no longer satisfied with being ignored. It appears in your every reaction, in every unhealed wound that rises from the depths of your being, like a buried scream, finally echoing across the years. And it is only when you face it without judgment, with boundless compassion, with total surrender, that the transmutation can begin. The alchemical process of turning lead into gold begins not from a place of perfection, but from a place of radical authenticity. Not from control, but from truth. And yes, you will want to run. Of course, you will. You were taught to escape pain, to patch it up, to spiritualize it away, to silence it with hollow affirmations and fake positivity. But awakening is not an escape. It is the ultimate confrontation. It is staring directly into the mirror of your own fragmentation and refusing, with every ounce of your being, to look away. You are not being asked to avoid your pain. You are being asked to feel it, to sit with it, to let it move through you, to let it show you what comfort and ease never could. And slowly, subtly, something shifts. You begin to realize that the pain was never the enemy. It was the doorway. It was the crack in your armor. It was the blessed fracture through which the light of consciousness could finally pour in. You begin to understand that your anger, your sadness, your fear, they were never broken parts of you. They were hidden messengers, each carrying a vital piece of your truth. And as you learn to listen to them, something softens inside you, something ancient and tender. You start to feel what you maybe have not felt in years, or perhaps ever: compassion. Not just for others, but a deep, aching compassion for yourself. For the child you once were who was never held in the way they needed. For the teenager who built a fortress of armor just to survive. For the adult who mistook productivity for purpose and achievement for worth. Now you see all of it, not with the harsh light of judgment, but with the soft glow of tenderness, with awe, with a kind of grace that can only rise from the ashes of your own self-abandonment. And in that grace, everything begins to shift. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer need to be perfect. You no longer need to heal completely in order to be worthy, because you finally remember who you are beneath it all. And that memory changes everything. You begin to understand that awakening was never a race toward a better, more enlightened version of yourself. It was always a return to honesty. Honesty with the chaos, honesty with the beauty, honesty with the profound and sacred paradox of being human and divine and afraid and eternal all at once. You emerge from the fire not healed, but whole. You are fractured, yet limitless. You are wounded, yet unbreakable. And in the raw, unflinching honesty of this paradox, you finally find solid ground. It is not the ground of safety, nor the ground of certainty. It is the sacred ground of your own truth. From this place, the old, exhausting performances begin to fall away. You no longer feel the compulsive need to convince anyone of who you are. You no longer contort yourself to fit into places that dim your magnificent light. You no longer sacrifice the truth of your soul on the altar of feeling safe, because you have finally, miraculously, become that safe place for yourself. Not because you have figured everything out, but because you have made a solemn vow to stop abandoning yourself, especially in the very corners of your heart where it hurts the most. You have stopped running, and that in itself changes everything. This is the state that very few people achieve, not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them how to stay. They were never taught how to stay with the searing discomfort, how to stay with the terrifying unknown, how to stay with their own soul long enough for it to feel safe enough to speak its truth. But you are staying, and because you stay, you are becoming real. Not polished, not perfect, but grounded, aligned, and deeply, shockingly alive. That is the beginning of the unbreakable you. You begin to see with a devastating clarity how much of your life was constructed from borrowed dreams. These were dreams you never consciously chose. They were chosen for you by culture, by fear, by generations of ancestors who never knew what wholeness looked like. They only knew what survival demanded. And survival demands that you shrink. It demands that you wear a mask, that you trade the wild authenticity of your soul for the conditional approval of the tribe. It demands that you bury your needs, your truth, and your divine hunger behind a polite smile that never quite reaches your eyes. But you are no longer just surviving. You are awakening. And with that awakening comes a sacred rage. It is not a petty or destructive anger, but a deep, thunderous, holy fury. It is a fury against the lie, a fury against the suffocating roles you played, a fury against all the ways you betrayed your own soul just to be accepted. And this rage is not a regression, it is a resurrection. It is the part of you that remembers, with the force of a tidal wave, I was never born to live asleep. Your voice begins to change. You may not speak louder, but you speak with a newfound clarity that cuts through noise and confusion. You learn to say no without the heavy cloak of guilt. You learn to say yes without needing to provide a lengthy explanation. You stop apologizing for taking up space, for being whole, for existing in your truth. And the world, which trained you so well to be compliant, does not know what to do with this version of you. It trained you to fit in, to obey, to dilute the potency of your spirit until it was palatable and acceptable. But now you are a frequency it cannot predict, a truth it cannot distort, a presence that wakes up the unconscious in others simply by existing. This is the profound power of embodiment. It is not about talking about your awakening or posting quotes about your healing. It is about becoming it. It is about breathing it, living it, and letting it move through every single moment of your life without resistance. And no, it is not glamorous. It is not always poetic. Sometimes embodiment looks like crying alone in your car, while your entire nervous system rewrites its ancient programming. Sometimes it looks like losing people you thought would be in your life forever, because your truth became too loud for the comfort of their silence. Other times it looks like saying a heartbreaking goodbye to a life that was built with love, but from the foundation of an identity that you no longer are. This is the real cost of becoming. You do not just lose your illusions. You lose entire identities. You lose the very structures that once held you up, even if you now realize they were also holding you back. And what comes to take their place is not immediate or clear or clean. It is a void, a vast, silent, sacred space where the old no longer fits and the new has not yet been born. You wake up in the morning and do not recognize the person in the mirror. You walk through the world feeling both ancient and newly born. You try to put the experience into words, but language crumbles, utterly inadequate for the task. You try to make a plan for the future, but the universe simply laughs, because this sacred space is not for building. It is for listening. It is for listening to that faint whisper beneath the noise of your thoughts, that whisper that says, let go of the plan, let go of the timeline, let go of the desperate need to understand it all. Let this process shape you, strip you down, and show you what remains when there is nothing left to protect. And what remains is real. It is not your carefully crafted character, not your polished performance, not the gleaming image you once guarded like a suit of armor. What remains is breath, presence, that deep, rhythmic pulse of being alive without having to prove a single thing. And in that raw, authentic space, you finally meet not the idealized self you hope to become, but the one who has always been there, waiting patiently for you to come home. You meet the wild one, the wounded one, the ancient one who remembers why you came here before the world taught you to forget. You no longer need to chase your purpose like a frantic hunter. You embody it in every step you take, in every word you speak, in every choice that leans into softness when everything around you calls for hardness. You no longer seek meaning as if it were a destination at the top of a staircase. You live it as a way of walking, of loving, of not abandoning your own soul when everything goes dark. This is the deepest phase of awakening, the one no one can truly prepare you for, not because it is a secret, but because it cannot be taught in words. It can only be lived. It is not a destination you arrive at or a peak you conquer. It is a rhythm, a return, a remembering. It is the self behind the shadow, the self before the mold, the self beyond the story. And when you begin to live from that place, not just visit it on weekends or during meditation, but truly inhabit it, everything changes. Not in an instant, not in a dramatic flash of light, but in a quiet, undeniable way that permeates every aspect of your being. Life becomes quieter, yet infinitely more fulfilling. You stop wasting your breath explaining yourself to those who were never truly listening. You stop handing over the authority of your intuition to so-called experts or external systems. You stop betraying your inner knowing just for the fleeting comfort of being liked. And then something miraculous and unexpected happens. You no longer chase love because you realize, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that you are that love. You always were. It is not waiting for you in the mirror's reflection, not in someone else's admiring eyes, not in some distant future moment. It is here, now, pulsating within you, and you begin to trust. You trust that a life aligned with your truth will unfold in its own perfect time. You trust that whatever falls away was never truly yours to begin with, and whatever remains will find you in this new, clear frequency. You no longer rush your process. You no longer beg the universe for clarity. You no longer fear the unknown. Now, the unknown feels like home, not because it has become predictable, but because you have discovered that within its mystery lies a different kind of strength, a strength that rises from the ashes of a complete soul collapse. Having made it all the way through, it is not a strength that screams or seeks validation. It does not shine in the ways the world taught you to measure worth. It is quiet. It is sovereign. It is the unshakable strength of someone who has remembered who they are without needing to be seen by anyone. Because when you die to everything that was not real, what remains is unbreakable, not because it can no longer break, but because it already has, and it has returned with a deeper, more compassionate truth. You no longer walk through life looking for proof that you matter. You walk as proof, not for others, but for your own soul, for that private, sacred part of you that remembers exactly how much it cost to reclaim your voice, to learn to walk alone, to burn the lie just to feel real again. This kind of strength is not built overnight. It is forged in the fire of absolute truth, in the trembling before the unknown, in those long, dark nights of the soul, when you thought you would not make it through until morning. And now survival is no longer the goal. Now there is only truth. Your life feels simpler now, not because it is easier, but because you no longer spend a single ounce of energy trying to be someone you are not. You no longer form bonds out of a fear of being alone. You no longer sell your precious time for a crumb of approval. You no longer dilute the profound depth of your being just to be accepted. You have come to know yourself too well to ever pretend again. And what once seemed like a curse, the exile, the disappointment, the silence now feels like grace, because it was the very path that led you here, to this stillness, to this truth, to this inner sanctuary that no one outside of you can ever give you or take away. Now you watch others run after possessions, chase meaning like fleeting shadows, and you do not judge them, because you remember being there, too. You still carry the scars of that race, but now you carry the light as well. Not a blinding, performative light, but a quiet, steady one. A light that calls to others, that says, you can stop running now. You can feel. You can return to yourself. And some will. They will see in you what they have been dying to remember in themselves. and others will not. And that, too, is okay. Because you no longer feel the need to awaken anyone. You only need to stay awake yourself, to stay rooted, to stay open, to stay real. This is the silent revolution. It is not about fighting the system, but about ceasing to feed it with your inauthentic energy. It is not about preaching about change, but about embodying what can no longer be denied within you. Your presence alone becomes a mirror, not a mirror that flatters, but one that reveals. Some will shatter in front of it, others will awaken, but their reaction is not your responsibility to manage. Your only job is to keep being the mirror, to keep being the clarity, to keep being the fire. This is how spiritual awakening becomes real power, not through performance, but through presence. You become something that cannot be moved, because you no longer live from the turbulent surface of your life, but from the eternal source, from that true self that was never lost, only asleep, pushed into the forgotten corners of your soul by fear, by habit, by pain. And now you remember how to rest without guilt, how to feel without carrying someone else's shame, how to speak your truth without shrinking, without implicitly asking for permission to exist. You remember how to walk through the world without explaining yourself, because your existence is no longer a question. It is an answer. You no longer ask, "Who am I supposed to be?" Now, you whisper with the quiet certainty of the universe itself, "I already am." And that is the final threshold. This journey has never been about becoming more. It has always been about unbecoming everything that was not you, so you could finally be who you were meant to be all along. Entirely, wholly, unapologetically you. The sacred and the chaotic. The divine spark and the shattered pieces. The healed scars and the still open wounds. The parts still bleeding and the fragile green sprouts just beginning to bloom. It is all part of you. And finally, everything is allowed. Nothing is exiled. Nothing is denied. You are no longer trying to escape your humanness. You are here to inhabit it, fully, with your eyes wide open, with your heart bare, with your spirit vulnerable, and with your soul brave. That is why you survived the spiritual awakening. Not because you mastered it, not because you rose above it, like some untouchable mystic. You survived because you stayed. You did not transcend to escape the pain. You remained in it. You allowed the fire to burn through you, not once, but again and again. You stood your ground as the awakening broke you, emptied you, and stripped you of every illusion, every identity, every mask, and every belief. And in the ruins of who you once thought you were, something real was finally born. You did not become a better version of yourself. You became an authentic one. And that is a far greater, far more powerful transformation.